Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to the Caring Economy with me, your host, Toby Usnik. And happy holidays. We're in December now, and I just want to wish everyone a healthy and happy holiday season in 2025. So today we have as our guest Michael D. Smith. He's the Chief Executive Officer of AmeriCorps. He's dedicated his career to social justice, working tirelessly to expand opportunities for children and families in underserved communities. And from his roots in Massachusetts to his current role leading the Federal Agency for Service and Volunteering, Michael's journey is a testament to the power of purpose-driven work. We met a few weeks ago at a conference board gathering, and I was just so struck by his optimism, his can-do spirit, his accomplishments to date. And I just said, we got to get this guy on the Caring Economy. So, Michael Smith, welcome to the Caring Economy.
Toby, thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
I always ask my guests to give us like a 2, 3, 4 minute sort of overview of their life. I mean, we're asking a lot to do in 2 or 3 minutes, but like where you're born, how you were raised, maybe mentors along the way, pivots. How did Michael get where he got today?
Sure. Well, I am from Western Massachusetts, from Springfield, Massachusetts, the birthplace of basketball and Dr. Seuss and Friendly's ice cream, amongst many other things. I was raised by a single mom. Both of my parents were 16 years old when I was born. I grew up in a, low income Black community that was kind of in that middle point in the 1980s that was flexing between a working class community and then dealing with some of the economic downturns that happened and unfortunately the crack epidemic. And so that beautiful working class neighborhood started to deal with, a lot of challenges related to the economy, related to violence. And so I grew up at a time where, I saw way too many of my friends fall victim to the school to prison pipeline or worse. And this idea, that you could achieve whatever dream you wanted to was becoming a little bit more challenged. But what I will also say is while I grew up in a community that didn't have a whole lot of resources, man, it was a community that took care of each other. And my mom sent me to my local Boys and Girls Club because she said she was looking for cheap daycare. Priorities, but she got so much more for her son. She got extra aunts and uncles and cousins and people that lifted me up, that kept me in line, that taught me about social justice and Black pride, gave me opportunities to work, gave me opportunities to serve at a very, very young age, and really opened my eyes and made me understand what is this whole thing called the nonprofit sector. I wanted to be like Carol Ross and Mr. Dawson, who ran the Boys and Girls Club. I wanted to be like Mama Morgan and Tony Malone and Tom Brennan, all of these people who weren't looking to get rich, weren't looking to get famous, but made all the difference for my family and me. And when I think about how it's possible that I am here now, having been able to live the life and have the jobs that I've had, it's directly back to those people who gave their all to my family and me.
Shout out to them. Are you an only child?
I am not an only child. I was my mother's only child for 26 years, and she remarried a man who was slightly younger than her, and called me one day to say, "You know how I had you at 16? I'm now having one at 43." And so I have a baby brother who's 19 years old, and then my dad had three more boys.
Wow.
So I much older than everybody, I've got four brothers.
I have four brothers as well, all from my mom, who was widowed with five kids when she was
Wow.
late 20s. And my husband's mom was widowed when in her eight kids, she was in her like late 20s as well. But the reason I ask about the siblings, well, it sounds like the community that surrounded you would have surrounded however many kids there were. But I wonder if you might reflect a little bit on the role of community today, because it seems to me that friends, neighbors, extended families were always not only welcome to, but expected to kind of like take care of the neighbors' kids and each other's. And now it seems like we've crossed this line where no, you don't tell my kid what to do and you can't do that. And I feel like the community is somewhat restrained now for all kinds of reasons in being one big family. Is that
Yeah.
something you've noted as well?
It's really interesting. So my family is a great migration family.
Okay.
Both of my grandmothers moved from the South sometime in the 1950s.
Mhm.
My mother's people from North Carolina, my father's people from West Virginia, and moved up north for more freedom and better economic opportunity. And so I grew up in what I consider a very Southern household, even though it was in
Sure.
Massachusetts. And there was just a way of doing things. And everybody was auntie and uncle if they were a little older than you. Everyone had the right to keep you in line and provide a level of discipline, but
Yeah.
everyone took care of you. And so I, for instance, could knock on almost every door on my street. I could ride my bike in and out of the neighbors' yards. Those people came over for picnics,
Mhm.
and the same was true for my church community. And that was a beautiful, wonderful thing. And when I think about what was rich about my childhood, it was, my Nana's friend, Mr. Hobby, who they had known for 40 years, that would just tell stories of old times, or Mr.
Mhm.
Trainum, who would take me out to have Chinese food every now and again, or like this,
Yeah.
just this great village of people that were there, not by blood, but because it was a community. And we all, people who didn't have a whole lot, gave their last to make sure everybody was taken care of.
Yeah, and also probably
Yeah.
kept people in line. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
no,
perfectly appropriate
absolutely.
for the neighbor to tell the kid, like, you sit down and wait your turn or something. But today you can't, like, you don't
Right.
tell my kid what to do. I think it's just,
Well, if I think about how it was possible for my mother to raise me as a single mom, it was because she had this village. Where I
yeah,
look at a lot of my friends nowadays who are doing very financially well, but maybe have moved far away from grandparents and aunts and uncles,
yeah,
and are struggling to wrap their kids with the kind of supports that I had growing up poor.
yeah,
And so I think people are rethinking. I think after the pandemic, you certainly saw a lot of people who went back home that never left because they wanted to have this reconnection. I will say, when I think about my job, we put out the Volunteering and Civic Life in America data, which measures the number of Americans that volunteer formally with nonprofits and those that do informal neighbor helping neighbor work. During the pandemic, we saw the first ever drop in the number of Americans that say they volunteer regularly with a nonprofit, 7 points. I'm proud to say the most recent report shows that's back up. It's almost completely back to where it is. And the neighbor helping neighbor, like I went grocery shopping for my elderly neighbor. I set up a learning pod. I helped, with the lawn. That has stayed strong and has actually had continued to grow across all demographics.
yeah.
So I still believe while things may look a little different from when we were growing up, there still is this desire to be there for our neighbors.
Yeah, I'm with you. I also think that it really is person to person, individual. You start to generalize or treat people monolithically, and it's not necessarily the most helpful thing. I mean, data and stats matter, but it's a whole nother thing when you look at your neighbor and he or she has a challenging situation. You can't turn away and say, well, that's not my problem. That's the government or whatever. Americans don't do that, I don't think, in general. But funny enough, I'm reading Cher's first part memoir right now, and it's
Mm,
all this that we're discussing. I mean, talk about deep South family background,
yeah,
poor, 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 in and out of schools constantly. But there was that community that you've described, that you
yeah,
had, that my mom had, with
yeah.
five young sons and stuff. Um, you have such an amazing pedigree and like so many accomplishments, but I kind of want to jump right into AmeriCorps. Tell our listeners and audience about AmeriCorps and this great organization and the state of volunteerism.
So AmeriCorps is a federal agency. We're the federal agency for volunteering and national service. We have a simple mission: how do you strengthen communities, improve lives, and foster civic engagement through volunteering and service? We're 31 years old. We were founded by President Clinton and a bipartisan group of members of Congress who, at that time, would have said, look, we don't have enough money to pay people to do all of the things that our communities need to thrive. But there is something beautiful about the American spirit where people are willing to roll up their sleeves. De Tocqueville saw it back in the 1800s that Americans don't wait for government, they just get things done. And that is still the case. And actually, wow, there are some people that won't only show up to the library once a week, but there's some people that are willing to take a year off, to take 2 years off,
Mm.
and really give back to their communities in extraordinary ways. And if we can invest in that, if we could lift that up, not only can we provide additional resources for our communities, for nonprofit organizations, we could potentially transform the lives of those who are serving as well. So in 1994, in September of 1994, the first 20,000 AmeriCorps members were sworn in. Today, we have 200,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers. that are serving in more than 40,000 locations all across the country. Some for a year, some for 2 years, some for 20 hours a week, some for 40 hours a week plus. All ages and all stages. We've got AmeriCorps members from 18 to 80 and beyond. Our largest footprint is in schools. We got about 50,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers in 10,000 schools. We got 15,000 people on the front lines of climate change and environmental stewardship. We have another 15,000 veterans that are serving, and actually we then in turn serve about 250,000 veterans and military families, folks doing public health, folks working in food banks, folks working in economic opportunity. So what's wonderful is if there is a challenge in a community and there are people of goodwill doing something about it, oftentimes AmeriCorps members are right in the mix.
So let's do a plug right now. How does one find out more about AmeriCorps or you if they want to learn more or get involved?
It's really easy. Go to AmeriCorps.gov. We have a tool called a Fit Finder. So we'll ask you a couple prompts. How many hours do you have to give? How old are you? Do you want to stay in your geography or move to another geography? So you'll ask a bunch of questions, and then it will spit out what kind of programs are available. So if you are someone that is feeling overstimulated and you don't want to see many people for a year, we'll send you to work in the parks in Montana. If you are someone from Montana who said, "Oh my God, I need to get away and I want to go deep," we'll send you to a community center in Philadelphia. Or if you want to stay at home, where 80% of our AmeriCorps Vista members, for instance, do, we can find a way to get you involved in your own community.
And it's pure volunteerism, or is there do you cover some costs, or if someone goes
No,
out?
this AmeriCorps is not unpaid volunteerism. That's why we call them members. So again, many of them are serving almost like in a full-time job, doing hard work, and so they've got to keep a roof over their head and food in their belly, so they get a living allowance. You're not going to get rich by any means when you serve in AmeriCorps. It's a bit of a sacrifice, even though we've been working hard to raise that living allowance for health reasons and dignity reasons. And you get an education award to help you pay for college or other post-secondary education. You get world-class training and support to make sure that your year of service can potentially turn into a lifetime of social sector action.
Great. And when we first met, you talked a little bit about some examples of AmeriCorps at work. I think Helene was one of them. Give us a couple of examples of where people might not even know that they're interfacing with AmeriCorps volunteers today or in recent months.
Sure. Since you mentioned hurricanes Helene and Milton, we actually have, since our founding, AmeriCorps does a lot of work in disaster response. So if there's a hurricane, a fire, or a flood, oftentimes AmeriCorps teams are some of the first to show up. They're mucking and gutting houses. They're helping people navigate to the resources that they need. In many cases, they might be working, for instance, with local organizations to rebuild, to demolish at times. So right now, for instance, after hurricanes Milton and Helene, we've had about 1,000 AmeriCorps members that are serving in the states that have been impacted, and we still have several hundred that are there at work. What I love, I think when we met, I told you about Hurricane Katrina, which is actually when I first got to know the agency back during the Bush administration. We had 40,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps seniors volunteers that served in Louisiana and Mississippi in the decade after Hurricane Katrina. So we are there in days after a storm, and then we stay for recovery, rebuilding, resilience, and then your kids need to get back to school and they need food and public health, and so we're still going to be there for you. So beyond our disaster response work, our biggest footprint is in schools. I think I said 55,000 AmeriCorps members and senior volunteers in about 10,000 schools. They're AmeriCorps City Year members. They're Teach for America AmeriCorps members. They're reading partners and Reading Corps and AMPAC members that are serving in our schools. We also have our new Youth Mental Health Corps program that we launch with the Schultz Family Foundation, Pinterest, and America Forward, where we'll have 1,000 AmeriCorps members that are serving as kind of peer navigators, helping their peers that might be struggling with mental health issues find resources, also doing a little cognitive behavioral therapy while they're getting training to think about staying in the youth mental health space. We have a public health AmeriCorps program with the Centers for Disease Control, which is trying to address the fact that we need 80,000 more public health workers. So we have 5,000 public health AmeriCorps members that are serving all over this country right now, and they're getting skills and training so that they'll end up staying in public health AmeriCorps jobs. And then we launched President Biden's American Climate Corps, where we now have almost 20,000 AmeriCorps members that are working to mitigate fires, that are working on coastal erosion, urban gardening, trail work, all in giving young people an effort to deal with climate anxiety by doing some climate action. So you're going to do real world action right now. And what we're doing more and more is giving them training that they need so that they'll end up having an opportunity to get those good paying green energy jobs of the future.
And they'll get some compensation now to get by, right?
Exactly, exactly. Some of
Amazing.
our highest living allowances in our environmental stewardship portfolios.
You sort of alluded to this and you talked about it when we met at the conference board. Talk a little bit, if you would, about how you work with other agencies across government. You're not siloed. You seem to be very nimble in being able to meet the crisis du jour and collaborate with the right partners, both private sector and government. So you're really quite the collaborators, it seems to me.
We are. What I love about AmeriCorps, we are not stale and status quo. We launch Public Health AmeriCorps in a year from idea to launch. We launched Youth Mental Health Corps probably within a year. Maybe American Climate Corps maybe was up to 2 years just because there were some delays in other places in Washington. But we know how to deploy passionate, proximate individuals who want to tackle challenges, and we can move pretty quickly to make sure that we're staying current on the issues that our communities are facing today. AmeriCorps was actually designed to be lean. We're a government corporation. Some people may have heard of the Corporation for National and Community Service, which is our official name. That's our government name. But we do business as AmeriCorps because no one knows what the Corporation for National and Community Service is. So we're a government corporation. And part of that was we were designed to leverage the heck out of federal investment. So, for instance, for every $1 federal that's spent, we see $17 returned to the community. That's from state funds, local funds, also private sector partnerships. So, as I mentioned, Youth Mental Health Corps, that's Pinterest and Schultz Family Foundation. American Climate Corps, that's 8 federal agencies. So we're leveraging dollars from 7 other agencies that have budgets that are much, much bigger than ours. We work to make sure that we're maximizing what we can do through cross-sector partnerships.
I love that. As I promised our audience at the beginning, your energy and your optimism is so inspiring. Ladies and gentlemen, again today on the Caring Economy, we're really happy to have as our guest Michael D. Smith, who's the Chief Executive Officer of AmeriCorps. And if you haven't heard of it or want to check it out, it's AmeriCorps.gov. Michael, let's talk about polarization and the administration that's leaving and is coming in. And you also helped us understand when we first met that this is a bipartisan organization. You work with everyone. I would even say nonpartisan is probably the better way. But can you kind of prognosticate on what the new administration might mean for AmeriCorps or some of the causes that you address?
You know what I would say? You're absolutely right. AmeriCorps has enjoyed bipartisan support from its very founding. When President Clinton was signing the legislation, he was surrounded by both Republicans and Democrats and everyone in between. And since then, we count amongst our friends and champions people from both sides of the aisle and rural communities where 30% of our funding goes, and urban communities and tribal nations. And so we've always been able to enjoy that support because service is still, one of the few places where people can come together across ideologies and see each other's humanity. They don't care what color hat you're wearing, who you voted for, where you went to school. They just want to roll up their sleeves and get something done for their community. So I am hopeful in this next administration that we will continue to see that strong bipartisan support that we've seen for the past 31 years.
I wonder if you've seen any evolutions in volunteerism, either in your tenure there or even out throughout your career. For example, faith-based communities have usually been very involved in volunteerism. You probably know the old book, Bowling Alone, and how civic engagement is down. So you talked a little bit about how with COVID, the numbers are back up again, but any sort of trends you've observed in volunteerism in your career or in your tenure with AmeriCorps?
Absolutely. Well, we talked about this a little bit before. We run the Volunteering and Civic Life in America study with the U.S. Census Bureau that we release every 2 years. So 2 years ago, that was covering the pandemic period. We saw the first ever drop, 7 percentage points down. And we were really concerned. Would that be a trend? Would that be a blip? And so the new data is showing, thankfully, that was a blip. Many people were turned away. People volunteer with their schools and their community centers, and folks weren't there. So that is turning around. And we're obviously seeing a record increase both in formal volunteering and informal volunteering. I'll tell you a couple other things that we saw is hybrid volunteering. It has taken root. So this idea that I could be someone that has marketing and communication skills, fundraising skills, and I live in Montana, and I could be doing that virtually for someone that is living in Florida, for a nonprofit that's working in Florida. So we've seen an increase in hybrid volunteering. And what we've seen with that is that really is beneficial for folks that are living with disabilities and also for senior citizens that tend to participate in that more. I would also say we've seen an uptick in the number of Americans that say that their companies that they work for are good corporate actors. Almost to the tune of 80% feel good about what their corporations are doing to serve their community. And that matches trends where we're seeing an increase in the number of Americans that trust companies more than they trust government. To the tune of, I think, about 30 points. And that's been rising year over year. And so that's been really interesting to watch. The other thing that has remained true is women volunteer more than men. So, surprise, surprise. Young parents volunteer more than people with older children or no children at all. So these folks that are busy with young kids are still doing more. And we're seeing boomers are doing more of the informal volunteering. And actually, the highest formal volunteering rate for an age group, not a generation, but for an age group, is 16 to 17-year-olds.
Really?
So that has been wonderful. And that also matches some trends that we're seeing. You know, when we launched American Climate Corps, which was really targeting young people, 50,000 people signed a form saying they wanted to do this within 6 weeks.
Wow.
And so I see a group of young people in this next generation that are looking to be engaged. They just want some support in finding out how. And so I'm really encouraged about this incoming rising generation.
Well, I so love that because everybody can be dismayed at different times in their lives, careers, elections, getting laid off, whatever. But you're not just offering a vision, you're actually giving the tools, the platform, the means to engage, right? Like if you have a concern, existential crisis about climate or fill in the blank, then there's a way to be involved and help solve it without even writing a check, right?
Yeah, don't be discouraged. Do something.
Yeah.
We have got a way for you to get involved. It's, you know, I think about that Children's Defense Fund quote, "Dear God, the
Right.
sea is so big and my boat is so small." Well, let me help you put your small boat to work
Right.
because
There
if
you
we
go.
all put our boats together, we can form a mighty armada.
I've never met Marian Wright Edelman, but she was the founder there. Have
Yes,
you ever met her? Or?
I have. I absolutely have, and I've been down to retreats at Haley Farm, and you know, I see myself as you know, hopefully following in the tradition of folks that
Man,
have been working to create hope and opportunity and possibility for communities that are so often looked aside.
yeah. Now, I don't want to lead the witness here, but I do with a lot of career coaching and stuff. I talk to people about how if you're in a company, in a business, or you're managing a team, you can't give everyone the pay increase or the job title or the promotion they want. But volunteerism is a great way to get our team members, our employees out to grow their leadership skills, to grow their skill sets. Would you agree with that? And do you have any examples to share from AmeriCorps where some of your, rock stars went on to great things?
Oh my goodness, there are so many examples. One, I would just also point to skilled volunteerism, which is so important. I remember I was working for Steve Case, who founded AOL for the Case Foundation, and we were doing a service project with him. And he said, you know, instead of them asking me to make sandwiches, they probably should have asked me to look at their business plan
Right.
or help them think about their tech strategy
Yeah.
or how to engage more donors online. And so I love the movement for pro bono volunteerism. That's not just about lawyers, but it's about accountants and marketers and you know all sorts of other skills that people can put to use. One of the things I like about AmeriCorps is we see a lot of career shifters, especially during the pandemic. The number of folks that were 55 and older that might have said, "Hey, I was a legal secretary, and during the pandemic, I just realized I couldn't do this for 5 or 10 more years." And so
Mhm.
I saw this AmeriCorps program in the schools, and so I tried it, and it was amazing to me. And now I'm actually an employee at the school after doing this. And so we see that all the time. A more recent example, we just launched something called Energy Communities AmeriCorps, which is a climate-related program that's helping folks that are living in communities that have dealt with high levels of pollution, brown sites, closed down coal mines. And our AmeriCorps Vista members are helping individuals transition into new careers and jobs after those communities have been hard hit.
Mm.
And I would say we had about 30 to 40 folks that came here to be sworn in and training, and half of them were 40 and older.
Wow.
That many of them were from those communities, had worked in those jobs, and AmeriCorps was their way to give back and also find a new path. So we see those sorts of things all the time. It's not just for the kid that's getting out of high school or college or around that age. It's also not just for someone who's 65 and doesn't want to sit in the rocking chair. There are
Right.
lots of opportunities everywhere in between.
Does that include things like AI and the technology divide and stuff? Are there services that you provide to help people upskill or train in that area?
So we have a lot of AmeriCorps programs that are working in the STEM space. Also, a lot of programs that are helping seniors, for instance, learn how to be smart online, so that they're not getting scammed. Obviously, a lot of AmeriCorps programs that are working in schools on STEM. I can't think of any AmeriCorps AI cores or anything like that,
Yeah.
but definitely trying to build internet safety skills and also make sure that our young people have STEM skills so that they can be better, more competitive for the jobs
Yeah.
of the future.
The name says it, it's AmeriCorps, so you're domestically focused, but do you have any sort of international impact or maybe organizations in other countries that you would cite as for our non-US listeners to know about?
Well, I would say one, we've been able to export this model. So I was, for instance, about a year ago in the United Kingdom sharing some lessons from our work because City Year is now in, I think, 3 cities in the United Kingdom, and City Year is our largest AmeriCorps program. And the UK started a UK Year of Service program that wanted to learn from us. But if you go to other countries like France and Germany, they have similar programs that learn from us all the time. So we try to share all of our lessons and make sure that other countries can learn from what we've been able to do, because it still is a kind of uniquely American thing.
Very
And
American.
otherwise, I would say we partner with Peace Corps. I was just with Carol Spahn, who is the CEO of Peace Corps, earlier in the week. And we partner on recruitment. We partner on outreach and marketing. We have something called the Harris Wofford Award. Harris Wofford helped to create both AmeriCorps and Peace Corps, and was CEO of this agency. And so we give an award for people that served in both Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, and we encourage that divide. And so Peace Corps has a great new tagline, which is going the distance to make a difference. And so we're excited. If you want to go the distance with Peace Corps, we will help you figure that out. And if you want to stay a little bit more local, there's a way to do that with AmeriCorps.
I love that. I do believe that we are on this planet to serve others, and the ability to help a young person realize that and see that, I think that is the way forward to a fulfilling life. To that end, I will ask you last question, which is the sort of pearls of wisdom that you've gleaned in your career, your purpose-driven life. I'm sure there are little mantras and things that you hear yourself saying regularly, and maybe you heard your mom say them to you when you were a kid or one of your mentors, but take it away. Words of wisdom or advice for our listeners about finding the right career path.
Well, I think about Gandhi's words, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in service, which relates to the adage that people say, if you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I believe that. I have been so overwhelmingly blessed to never work a job where I didn't wake up every day excited about the mission. And actually, the data backs it up that when you do that, you have increased physical health, you have increased mental health. For our seniors, you live a little bit longer. And so find that thing that brings you joy. Find that thing that matches your gift with a challenge that is waiting for someone to solve it. And you will not only make a difference in communities, but you'll make a difference in your own life. And I would also remind folks that doesn't always have to be the nonprofit sector. We have an AmeriCorps alum who's a senior executive at the United Talent Agency who brings this kind of ethos to her work every day. We have members of Congress. We have folks working in the White House. We have folks running corporations. And there's a way to bring this desire to want to make our communities and our country a better place. And if you can find that link up, it will be fulfilling in ways that you could never imagine.
Here. And also just put a stake in the ground, right? You've given everyone the invitation today to just check out AmeriCorps.gov and see how easy it is to just explore. That's a big step forward right there. So, Michael Smith, CEO of AmeriCorps, can't thank you enough for joining us here. I wish you a wonderful holiday season. This interview really is in the spirit of the holidays, and I can't thank you enough.
Toby, thanks for what you do. Happy holidays to you as well.
Thanks.